Gather around the virtual campfire, dear listeners, for a night of spine-tingling tales that will haunt your every thought. In this special Halloween edition, I've conjured up 10 bone-chilling stories that will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning every creak in the night. From unwelcome spirits to eerie encounters in the darkness, these stories are not for the faint of heart. So dim the lights, turn up the volume, and prepare for a journey into the abyss of terror. Are you ready to face the horrors lurking in the shadows this Halloween night? Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of my future nightmare-inducing tales. It was a Saturday night close to Halloween, and it was very cold out, snowy with howling wind. I was watching the movie Halloween, the original one, and I didn't plan on sleeping at all that night. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was starting to fall asleep when our family dog Sarge started pleading at the door to go outside. I sighed. I was comfy on the couch, warm and wrapped in my soft blanket, and did not want to go outside into the cold. Sarge kept scratching at the back door until I finally gave in. I paused my movie, grabbed my winter jacket, put my boots on, and put on Sarge's leash. I opened the back door and it was freezing. It looked like I was inside of a snow globe. All the white, soft, fluffy snow blanketed the yard. What was annoying was Sarge wouldn't go to the bathroom unless we walked him all the way to the back of our backyard. There was about 3 feet of snow and I was not happy about it. After about 10 minutes of waiting for Sarge to go, he finally did, and we thankfully made our way inside. I shut the door behind me, but immediately noticed something strange. There were giant, wet footprints in my kitchen, leading all the way to my dad's office. It was past 1 in the morning. I know my dad would not be up at this hour. I called out, "Hello?" I heard a noise come from inside my dad's office. I was terrified at this point. Did someone come inside while I walked Sarge? I moved closer to the office, listening closely, and I heard movement. Someone was definitely in my dad's office, and it was not my father. I took a deep breath and pushed open the office door. It was pitch black in there. I didn't see anything. I moved my hand around trying to find the light switch and then flicked it on. I screamed bloody murder. There, in the corner, was a man dressed in all black. Black ski mask, black gloves, black everything. He had something in his arms and then proceeded to jump clean out of the office window. Seconds after, my mom and dad came sprinting down and found me standing in the office alone and petrified. We called the police and made a report. The intruder was only able to steal one of my dad's laptops. But what was worse is the mental damage it's done to me. Having an unknown person invade your private space like that does something unsettling to your mind. Be careful this holiday season. I know it's full of fun scares and tricks or treats, but at the same time, it can be filled with darkness and evil. Stay safe out there. When I was about 7 to 8 years old, my family rented a house close to the beach for a week during October. This was in Florida, so it was still hot. The drive wasn't very long, but as an 8-year-old, by the time we got there, I really had to use the bathroom. We pulled into the driveway and we were met by a middle-aged woman who owned the house, showed us the place, told us about the town and what to do, etc. My first instinct was to find the bathroom, so I asked, and she told me it's the second door on the right after the kitchen. I got inside and opened the bathroom door, and there was an older guy just standing there looking at me with this blank, creepy stare. I kind of ducked my head down, said sorry, and went back outside. They noticed I was back pretty fast. I told them there was someone in the bathroom already. That's when it got weird. The lady looked at me confused and said, "There's no one else in the house." I explained that I definitely saw someone in that bathroom. After searching the house, we found no evidence of anyone else being there. After a while, the lady told us her dad owned the house and he lived there and recently passed away. She inherited the house and wasn't sure what to do with it, so she started renting it out. I'm pretty sure I saw her dad, so next time I will go to the bathroom before the road trip. This is the story of how a creepy encounter with a scary man at a harbor cafe saved me from something even more terrifying. It was in the autumn of 1994 and I was 19 years old. At the time, my dad had been working for almost 6 months abroad and I was planning a surprise visit. My dad and I have always been close. I am an only child and my mother died of cancer when I was still a baby. So it was just my dad and I, really a tiny little family, but he made up for it by being the most awesome parent ever. Now that I wasn't a little kid anymore, I appreciated that more and more. I had booked the ticket and was ready to go. It was going to be great fun to surprise him with a visit. I had to take the ferry though, and I had just got my driver's license, and I felt really unhappy about having to drive my little car on board the ferry. So I decided to not bring a car at all and just rent one once I got there. Having time to waste, I decided to have coffee at a nearby cafe since I was early and they hadn't started letting people onto the ferry just yet. At the cafe, there were lots of truck drivers, and I soon realized I was the only woman there. One man, a 40-ish bloke with ice blue eyes and tattoos all over, was eyeing me from across the room. Something about him made my skin crawl. I got up to leave, feeling suddenly very uncomfortable, and to my utter horror, he followed. What do I do now? I asked myself. This was before everyone owned a cell phone, I might add. I decided to try and look busy and maybe he would leave me alone. So I pulled out my ticket and I tried to look like I was reading it very carefully when he suddenly snatched it from my hand and said, I'm on the same boat. I'll have hours of your company then. How lovely. In a voice that was an absurd combination of jovial flattery and hidden hostility. I felt very strongly that if I got on that boat with this man who now knew my booking details, I'd be in grave danger. I can't explain why the feeling was so overwhelming, but it was, and I decided there and then to not get on the boat. The ticket had been cheap anyway, so I can get on the next one instead. I hid in the ladies' room until I knew the ferry had left, and then I went to rebook my ticket. The story could have ended here, a creepy encounter with a stalkerish man, but it doesn't. I was right in the assumption that getting on that ferry would have been unbelievably dangerous. So have you figured it out yet? The date was September 28th, 1994. The name of the ship was MS Estonia, and that cold night she sank in the Baltic Sea, taking 852 people with her, resulting in the worst ferry catastrophe to strike Sweden to this day. I still recall that day with horror and wonder what would have happened if this creepy man had not taken an interest in me, if I had not listened to my instincts and gotten on board instead of waiting for the next boat. Would I have been among the survivors, or would my dad have seen my name on the list of lives lost in the Baltic Sea? Firstly, my wife is also a Redditor and has been severely traumatized by our recent experience. She does not like to talk about this, so to prevent anyone from sending her messages, this is a throwaway account. My wife and I bought our first house in February 2010. We immediately fell in love with it as soon as we laid eyes on it. It had everything we wanted and plus a few extras. For the first month, everything was great. Lots of painting and decorating, getting it just the way we wanted. Then weird things started to randomly happen. First, it was small things like things upstairs being moved, put in completely different rooms than where they belonged. I chalked it up to my wife just forgetting to put things back where they belonged. The house also started to creak pretty loudly. This is a fairly new house, so I just figured it was probably settling as most new houses tend to do. One day, the wife and I were preparing dinner in the kitchen. Our stairs sit right next to the kitchen entrance, so any noises upstairs were clearly audible into the kitchen. I turned off the water at the sink, and as soon as I did, we both heard a cough. We have no kids, and no one was visiting. The windows were all shut, the television was not on. This sent the coldest chill down my spine, and I could feel the blood running out of my face. I looked at my wife, and she too had gone pale and had this look of absolute fear. Someone was in our house, and they were upstairs. I quickly grabbed the sharpest knife I could find, and my wife called the police. I walked to the bottom of the steps and stood silently and heard a loud pop creak, just like the ones I have always heard the house make. My hands were shaking, and my wife was whispering to the 911 operator, telling them that we think we have a robber in our home. The police arrived in minutes. Thankfully, they had been patrolling nearby. The officer walks slowly up the stairs, gun drawn. He calls out, "This is the police. Is anyone upstairs?" No response. I'm right behind him, walking up the stairs. We look into the first bedroom and closet. Empty. No one in the half bath either. Last room is my office where I have my PC. No one in the room or the closet. So I felt the tension ease away. Felt like a complete tool making this officer search the house only to find nothing. We turned to walk out of the room, and right above us, creak. I just about lost it. In my office closet, there's an attic access. The officer pulled the steps down and again calls out, "Is anyone up there? This is the police." No response. He turned on his flashlight and peeked his head up. He found a man in his 40s kneeling there in the attic, looking dead at him. Gun drawn, he tells the man to come out and put his hands behind his head. They arrest the man. He didn't say a word the whole time and would not look anyone in the eye. He was scruffy looking and had dirty clothes on. Me and my wife were freaking out. I don't think either of us have fully gotten over it. After questioning the man in the police station, we found out that he was a homeless man who found refuge in the house while it was still on the market. He said the doors were unlocked and so he stayed there. Apparently a realtor must have forgot to lock the door after showing someone the house. He said that when people would come to the house, he would hide in the second-floor attic. We bought the house and this guy was living in it for a whole month without us even knowing. It really freaks me out to still think about this. So just some advice. Don't shrug off all those bumps in the night. You could have a homeless man living in your attic. So driving by myself in the afternoon, I stopped at Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign just to prove I was there to friends who dared me to take that route to I-40. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I'm driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stop sideways across both lanes, a suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere, and two bodies lying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and a chamber round. Something seemed very wrong. It looked too perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Was I being paranoid? Something was just wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable. It was a horror movie move. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerved to the right side of the woman behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped into first gear, punched it, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it or either of the bodies on the road. I continued forward a couple 100 feet and slowed down so I can breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror, I saw that the two bodies had gotten up to their knees and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I'll never know what would have happened to me if I had gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Somehow I do not think it would have been good. Sometimes real life can be scarier than the movie. When my mom was about 3 years old, my grandma and grandpa moved into an apartment on the 9th floor in downtown Columbus. After they moved in, she didn't have many friends, so she developed an imaginary friend named Kathy. Over the course of a year, her relationship with Kathy was getting out of hand. She didn't want to play with anything or anyone else. My grandma and grandpa took her to counseling and to see psychologists, but they just said it was normal childhood behavior. She started blaming Kathy for things that had gotten broken and messes that were made, and my grandpa had had enough. My grandpa went out to get a dog to occupy her time with instead of her imaginary friend. So he goes out and gets a German Shepherd pup from the pound and brings it home. When he gets back, my mother's playing in the corner by a window with Kathy. As soon as he walks in, the dog stares straight at my mom and starts barking and snarling. All of the hair on his back is raised and he's ready to attack. And my mom starts screaming. All of a sudden the dog stops and my mom just starts crying. My grandparents are freaked out at this point and ask my mom what happened. And she says that Kathy fell out of the window. After that, she never played with or mentioned Kathy again. Cut to a few months later, they are moving out of the apartment because my grandma, super religious, can't handle what happened. My grandpa talks to the landlord and somehow the story comes up about Kathy. The landlord is shocked and tells him that the tenants before them moved out after their 5-year-old daughter, Kathy, fell out of the window and died. I don't have any way to verify whether this is actually a family story or whether it's an urban legend, so here goes. My family has lived in rural Nebraska since they immigrated from Germany in the mid 1800s. Near the turn of the century, disease was pretty rampant in the homesteading area and it killed off members of almost every family. When someone died from illness, time was of the essence in burying them so as not to let the virus spread from the deceased to the living. This meant no wait periods. So an aunt of some unknown number of greats preceding her relationship to me dies of some disease and she gets buried in the family cemetery on the homestead. The dogs were very fond of her, so it wasn't too surprising that after the funeral the two dogs stuck near the grave. The rest of the family began to think something of it when, a week and a half later, the dogs were still visiting her grave almost constantly. But they weren't just at the grave. They were visibly distressed, frantic, and often barking while there. This goes on for maybe 2 weeks when the family decides to check it out. They dig the casket up and open it. The deceased's hair has been pulled out. Her fingers are raw and bloody and mangled from where, on the inside of the casket door, they could see deep scratches in the wood. She was comatose when they buried her, and she came to while underground, probably spending her last 5 or so days alive in a buried casket. My family moved into a condo my freshman year of high school. It was a newish development in the rural part of town. The first month or so went smoothly, but after a while my parents started talking about weird stuff that was happening around the house. The lights in the fixtures would stop working all of a sudden, even if my dad had just replaced them. Upon further inspection, they found out the lights had actually been unscrewed and left loose inside the fixture. And these lights on the ceiling were semi-labor-intensive to reach the actual bulb. A few more months went by and they were mostly uneventful. And then my mom moved into my bedroom. She had been sleeping on an air mattress, and one of the first nights, she claimed that she woke up at 3 a.m. to the feeling of someone sitting on the end of the bed. Another night, she woke up feeling like someone was trying to pull the blanket off of her from the foot of the bed. A couple weeks later, she woke up to the sound of the window shade hitting the wall as if someone had lifted it up above their head and let it drop back down. The next night, she double-checked to see if the windows were closed and locked, and they were. She woke up to the sound of the shades again and the bedroom door slamming shut. I was kind of skeptical about all these stories just because I never woke up to any of this, but I slept like a rock and the house gave me weird vibes anyway, so I did keep an open mind. Then one night after my mom had officially abandoned my room, I woke up around 3 to 4 a.m. with sleep paralysis. It was the first time it had ever happened to me, so I didn't know what was going on. I was too busy panicking to look around the room. When I finally calmed down, I noticed a shadow at the foot of my bed. It was the distinct outline of a tall, thin man with a wide brim hat. I just kind of looked at him for a while, trying to process what was in front of me, and he didn't really move. He just stood there and looked back. I eventually closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. In the morning, I told my mom what happened, and she pretty much immediately scheduled an appointment with a medium. To put a long story short, the woman ended up telling us that the man I saw was a farmer who owned the land we lived on, and he was pissed that a bunch of strangers were squatting on his property. So I guess he was trying to spook people into leaving. I never knew any of the neighbors, but I wonder if they had to deal with the same shenanigans. There is an infamous haunted covered bridge where I grew up. It has been said that if you stop halfway on the bridge, shut the engine off, hit the lights, and roll down your windows, you can hear moaning and groaning of the dead coming from the creek that's beneath the wooden structure. It has been said that many bodies have been found in pieces in the water. Another story is that the trees that lead up to the bridge were used for hangings, and then the bodies would be dumped into the creek. Fast forward to the night before Halloween 2006, and I'm joyriding with a few friends. One of us dares Darren, the only one with a license in our group at the time, that he should go through the covered bridge and stop halfway. Darren was scared, but after a round of calling him a chicken, he agreed to go. It was a fairly cold night. We go down the back road and approach the road to the covered bridge. We began driving through the tree-guided road, and after about a minute of driving through the low, thick fog, we came to the bridge. We stopped just before it and rolled down the windows. The wind begins to rustle through the trees and starts howling through the darkness of the bridge. We slowly creep onto the bridge, and it feels as if the bridge is just going to give way to the creek below, sending us with it. We make it halfway, kill the car, and hit the lights. We're sitting there in the darkness, all scared, and waiting for the moaning and groaning to start. We begin to hear what sounds like large objects being slammed into the water below us. Over and over again, large splashing sounds are heard. At this point, Darren had had enough, and Jake and Chris had to physically stop Darren from letting out a yell so we could continue to listen to what was happening. Suddenly, a large gust of wind howls through the bridge, and we hear faint groans and pleas for help. We all look at each other with fear and excitement all rolled into one. Darren immediately turns on the lights, slams the car into reverse, and we're out of the bridge in seconds. He whips the car around, and we begin speeding back down the tree-guided road. We're all looking back and just expecting to see something, anything, come charging out from the covered bridge that would explain these sounds. Before we can think a second longer, Darren slams on the brakes and begins panicking. He's speaking in gibberish at this point, and we're all trying to calm him down. He begins frantically looking back. He finally strings together a sentence and tells us to all look back behind us. So we all look back and see a limp figure hanging from the tree. Our first reaction to seeing this is to completely dismiss it and think it's some prank. Darren isn't having any of that. Jake gets out of the car and begins to slowly walk up to it. It takes Jake no longer than 10 seconds before he moves it back into the car, yelling at Darren to drive. Darren floors it out of there, and as we're driving away, I ask Jake what he saw. Jake says that when he got close enough, he saw that the figure was as real as it could get. He saw steam rising off of it, and the way the neck was contorted looked so real. He could see the lifeless figure sway in the wind and hear the tree struggle to hold on to the weight that's pulling on its branch. We all got back to Darren's house and tried to erase the night from our minds. The next morning, I called my uncle. He was starting his normal route as a cop in a few towns over, and asked if there had been any reports of a hanging or bodies found near the covered bridge. Of course he said no, and we all felt at ease with the situation. We still get together every year during the stretch of Halloween week, typically the 26th to the 1st of November. One of us will always bring up this night and the true fear that has been instilled into us. We can't explain it, but it's a force that continues to scare us to the bone. We have yet to even gather up enough courage to go back and experience it all again. Maybe this year is the year we go back. My experiences began fairly young. I've always seen and heard things. I've had a few dreams that came true, and it always freaks out my mom when I know someone has died. The scariest thing that ever happened to me when I was a teenager. My friend proclaimed herself a white witch and studied all about it. She brought her Ouija board over once and we were messing around with it. We contacted something that said he was my cousin. I had an interesting time but didn't really put a lot of faith in it. I've seen how those things were debunked. Anyway, this entity said it was going to play a joke on my mom, and the board went dead for a few minutes. When it came back, we asked what happened, and the response said, "You will see." About a minute later, my mom came into my bedroom and asked me what I wanted. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. Mom said, "I was in the laundry room, and when I turned around, you were standing there smiling. I asked what you wanted, but you never said anything. I went back to the laundry, and when I looked up again, you were gone." I had never left my room. This thing made itself look like me, and my mom interacted with it. I told my friend not to bring that board back. She put it in a box like a cedar chest or hook chest and piled stuff on the lid. When I came over, we could hear the lid trying to open. Eventually, we ceremoniously burned it. So let me know what you think of these stories. Do you have any of your own you want to share? Send them to me at my email address pinned in the comments. I would love to narrate them. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoy your Halloween. Please stay safe, and thank you for listening.